Welcome to the deep dive. Ever wondered if those really smart AI models like Gemini and GPT can actually get a handle on human emotions just by watching videos? That's exactly what we're unpacking today. We've sort of waded through some pretty fascinating research to give you, the learner, a shortcut to understanding the cutting edge of AI and, well, its attempts to decode our feelings.
Yeah, and get ready because there are some surprising insights here about what these models can do, but maybe more importantly, what they still struggle with when it comes to our inner emotional lives.
Absolutely.
What's fascinating right off the bat is that this isn't about AI just recognizing, a smile or a frown on screen.
Right, it's deeper than that.
Yeah, the research we're exploring dives into how well these multimodal large language models, MLLMs, for short, understand what are called high-dimensional complex emotion structure.
High-dimensional.
Think of it as going way beyond simple happy or sad and getting into the really intricate web of our feelings.
Exactly. So the researchers basically showed a bunch of videos to people, asked them how they felt, right? Then they fed the same videos to these AI models and asked them to predict sort of the viewer's emotions.
That's the core setup.
And our mission today is really to see how well the AI captured those subtle emotional nuances, those, interconnected feelings we experience when we watch something engaging. We're not just looking at surface level reactions.
No, it's about the internal experience. Can the AI tap into that? The research you shared is our roadmap for figuring that out.
Okay, so let's zoom in on this idea. You mentioned high-dimensional emotion structures. What does that actually mean?
Well, for a long time, the thinking was that our emotions were pretty basic. Maybe, a handful of core feelings or just a scale from good to bad. Maybe with different intensities like high energy, low energy.
Valence and arousal, that kind of thing.
Exactly. But more recent studies looking at tons and tons of data have revealed a much richer picture. We're talking about potentially dozens of distinct emotional dimensions.
Dozens.
Yeah, and some are even linked to specific patterns of brain activity. It's complex stuff.
Right, so instead of just labeling something as happy, we might be looking at more specific feelings like joyfulness or contentment, maybe even pride. And each has its own flavor and relationship to other emotions.
Spot on. And capturing that complexity is really why it's so interesting to see if these advanced AI models can make sense of it. Simpler AI just wouldn't have the horsepower.
Makes sense.
Precisely. And that's where these multimodal large language models, the MLLMs, come into play.
Okay, MLLMs, just remind us quickly, what makes them multimodal?
Good question. They're not limited to just text. They can process a whole mix of information, words, images, and sometimes even sounds, audio.
Got it. So they take in more than just language.
Right. And they've already shown they can pick up on emotions from outward cues like recognizing facial expressions in photos or analyzing the sentiment of a news article. That's kind of established.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting, right? Can they go deeper?
That's the million-dollar question.
The core question of this research is whether these MLLMs can accurately infer those internally felt emotions, that complex emotional landscape we were just talking about, just by watching videos.
Yeah, it's almost like a two-part puzzle for the AI. First, it has to figure out what's actually happening on screen, the content recognition bit.
That's step one.
And then it has to reason about how that content might make someone feel internally. And that second part, the reasoning about feeling. That's the real challenge here.
Okay, so how did the researchers actually test this?
Well, they tackled this by using existing collections of data, big data sets where people had already watched various video clips and rated their own emotions.
So the human data was already there.
Exactly. Then they showed those same videos to powerful MLLMs like Gemini and GPT and asked them, essentially, how strongly would a viewer feel these different emotions watching this?
And what about AI that couldn't watch a whole video?
Good point. For the AI models that couldn't directly process video streams back then, they cleverly used snapshots or keyframes extracted from the videos as input.
Okay, so the AI became like a virtual audience member, rating its predicted feelings. But you said it's not just about whether the AI used the same words like happy or sad. They focused on emotion structure. What exactly is that in this context?
Right. Think of emotion structure as the underlying pattern or maybe the map of how different videos make us feel in relation to each other.
Okay, like a map.
Yeah. So if two videos evoke similar emotions, say one of puppies playing and another of kittens chasing a laser pointer, both generally making us feel, happy or amused.
Right, similar vibe.
They'd be considered close together in this emotional pattern, this map. But a video of, say, a spider suddenly appearing might be emotionally really distant, triggering fear or disgust.
Ah, so it's the overall landscape of these emotional relationships.
Exactly. It's like creating this whole terrain of feelings based on different video experiences.
And the researchers focused on these relationships, the structure, rather than just the specific emotion labels themselves. Why was that distinction so important?
Well, they pointed out that a human's internal sense of joy might be slightly different from how an AI represents or labels joy. There can be subtle differences in usage or understanding.
Sure, the labels might not map perfectly.
Precisely. But by looking at whether the AI understands that the puppy video and the kitten video evoke similar feelings, relatively speaking, compared to the spider video.
You get a more fundamental sense of whether it's grasping the underlying emotional connections people make.
Exactly. It abstracts away from just the labels and looks at the relational consistency.
Okay, so how do they compare these human emotional maps or terrains with the ones generated by the AI? What methods did they use?
They use two main methods. The first is called representational similarity analysis, or RSA.
RSA. Got it.
Think of it like comparing two heat maps of emotions for the exact same set of videos. You're asking, how similar are the overall patterns of hot spots and cold spots, the similarities and dissimilarities?
So it assumes you're lining up video 1 from the human map with video 1 from the AI map, video 2 with video 2, and so on.
Correct. It assumes a direct correspondence. You're checking if the patterns of relative emotional distances between videos match up.
So it's about seeing if, for example, the videos that humans found emotionally close are also the ones the AI flagged as emotionally close.
Spot on. That's RSA. The second method is called Gromov-Wasserstein Optimal Transport, or GWOT.
GWOT. Okay, sounds complex.
It's a bit more flexible, actually. It doesn't assume that perfect video-to-video match from the start. Instead, it tries to find the best possible alignment between the two emotional structures, the two maps, based purely on their internal shape or geometry.
Okay. So it's less strict about matching video 1 to video 1.
Right. Imagine you have one map with like clusters of different feelings, maybe a fear cluster here, a joy cluster there, and the AI map also has clusters. GWOT tries to see if it can rotate or stretch one map to best fit the other, aligning the clusters or categories even if the individual points, the specific videos, don't line up perfectly.
Ah, I think I get it. So even if the AI doesn't label the puppy video with the exact same intensity of joy as a human, GWOT can see if the puppy video in the AI's emotional map is still in a similar emotional neighborhood to other joyful videos, compared to where humans placed it. It's looking for broader category alignment.
That's a great way to put it. They use an analogy like having a pile of ghost and skull shapes and another pile of dog and cat shapes. GWOT can figure out that, hey, ghosts and skulls form one kind of category and dogs and cats form another, and these categories roughly correspond between the two piles, even if you don't perfectly link a specific ghost to a specific skull.
Okay, so it helps distinguish between the AI getting the fine-grained video-by-video feeling right versus just getting the broader strokes, the general types of emotions evoked.
Precisely. Using both RSA and GWOT gives a more complete picture. RSA checks for overall pattern similarity, assuming alignment, while GWOT looks for the best possible structural alignment, revealing fine item versus coarse category agreement.
That makes sense. You get different levels of insight. So before they even pitted the AI against humans, what did they find out about how consistent humans are with each other? Did they set a baseline?
Yes, they did. And that's crucial, right? They split the human participants from one of the data sets into two groups and compared their emotional maps for the same set of videos.
You need to know how much agreement there normally is between people to even judge the AI's performance fairly.
Exactly. And what they discovered was pretty interesting. While the specific emotion ratings for individual videos showed only moderate agreement between the two human groups.
So people didn't always put the exact same number on how sad a video was, for instance.
Right, there was variation there. But the overall pattern of emotional similarities and differences across all the videos, the structure, the map was remarkably consistent between the two groups. The RSA correlation was quite high.
So even if we quibble about the precise intensity, our general sense of which videos feel similar emotionally and which feel different is pretty much shared. That's a key baseline.
It is. And using GWOT, they found a decent, though not perfect, level of one-to-one video matching between the human groups, but a very high level of matching at the broader category level.
So humans tend to put videos into similar emotional buckets, even if the exact placement varies a bit.
Yes. This basically set a rough upper bound. You wouldn't necessarily expect an AI to do better than this human consistency, especially on the fine-grained level.
Okay, the stage is set. So what happened when they put the AI, Gemini specifically, was the main focus in the first set of experiments, right?
Hmm.
Up against these human emotional patterns for that first video collection.
Okay, so first looking at the individual video ratings, they found a significant but still moderate level of correlation between Gemini's predictions and the average human ratings.
Moderate correlation, how did that compare to the human agreement?
Interestingly, it was actually slightly higher than the agreement between the two groups of human participants for individual videos.
Wait, really? That's surprising. So, on average, the AI's guess for a single video was slightly closer to the overall human average than one group of humans was to the other group.
A little bit, yeah. It's a curious finding. It raises questions, doesn't it? Maybe the AI is picking up on some core signal that individual humans vary around. Or maybe it's averaging out the noise in a way. Hard to say for sure.
Interesting. Did they look at which videos Gemini was good at predicting?
Yes, they did. And a pattern emerged. Gemini did well on videos that seemed to evoke strong, clear emotions based on a single, powerful visual element.
Like what kind of visuals?
Think a really cute baby or puppy triggering feelings like cuteness or love, or maybe a dark, shadowy setting with a figure suddenly appearing, leading to fear. Also things like surgical scenes evoking empathic pain, stuff where the visual itself is very potent.
So, strong, almost unambiguous visual triggers. The AI seemed to nail those.
It seemed to, yes, the visual features were key.
But what about the videos where Gemini struggled? Where did it fall short?
These were often videos where understanding the emotion really required more context, maybe understanding a narrative or social dynamics.
The tricky ones.
Exactly. For instance, they mentioned a video that starts with a romantic kiss.
Seems straightforward.
But then it takes a sudden, dark turn towards violence. Humans watching would likely feel that shift, maybe from initial romance to discomfort, anxiety, or fear.
Right, the context changes everything.
But Gemini, perhaps focusing too much on that initial strong visual of the kiss, might have overpredicted romantic or sexy and missed the crucial narrative shift and the resulting negative emotions.
So it missed the story arc.
It seemed to struggle with that unfolding context. Also, videos that were just very brief or maybe ambiguous where even humans weren't entirely sure how to feel, those also resulted in lower accuracy for the AI.
Okay, so it's good at the immediate visually driven stuff, but less good when the emotion depends on understanding a sequence of events or social cues or ambiguity.
That seems to be the pattern. Now, when they looked at the overall structure using RSA, the correlation between the human map and Gemini's map was moderately strong. Significant, but definitely lower than the human-human correlation.
So the overall pattern matched okay, but not as well as humans match each other. What about the GWOT analysis, the category matching?
Right. With GWOT, the precise video-to-video matching, that fine-grained alignment, was actually quite low across the whole data set.
Oh, so it wasn't often mapping the exact same video to the same emotional spot.
Not consistently across the board, but the matching of broader emotion categories was reasonably good, around 50% category alignment.
Okay, so half the time it was putting videos into roughly the right emotional neighborhood, even if the exact address wasn't perfect.
That's a good way to think about it. Gemini wasn't perfectly mirroring the human feeling for each specific video, but it was getting a decent sense of the general emotional kinds, the categories, that different types of videos tend to fall into.
That feels like a really important nuance. It understands the general landscape, maybe, but not all the specific landmarks yet.
Exactly. And here's another interesting bit. When they zoomed in and looked only at the subset of videos where Gemini's initial predictions were most similar to the human ratings.
So the ones that seem to get the best individually.
Yes. For that subset, both the video-to-video matching and the category matching rates with GWOT jumped significantly higher.
Oh. So for the videos it understood well on an individual level, it also had a much clearer grasp of their place within the larger emotional structure. That makes sense.
It suggests that when it gets the core feeling right, it also tends to place it correctly within the broader emotional context relative to other videos.
Okay, that was one data set. They also ran these comparisons on a different, larger set of videos, didn't they? How did Gemini perform there? Was it similar?
It was broadly similar, but with some interesting differences. On the second larger data set, the average accuracy for predicting the emotion for individual videos was actually even higher for Gemini.
Higher than the first data set. Huh.
Yeah, a bit higher correlation there. but the types of videos it performed well on and struggled with followed that same pattern we just discussed.
So still good with strong visual triggers.
Right. Things like insects reliably evoking disgust, or maybe needles and blood triggering disgust, or horror, it seemed to get those.
And still struggled with context.
Yes. Things like a near-miss accident is the viewer feeling amusement or relief or fear that's context-dependent. Or seeing someone ignored during a high five is that awkwardness, amusement, secondhand embarrassment. Again, requires interpretation. Gemini had more trouble there.
Same fundamental challenge. And what about the structural comparisons on this larger data set, RSA and GWOT?
The RSA correlation comparing the overall patterns remained moderately strong, very similar to the first dataset.
Okay. And GWOT?
Similar story there too. The precise video-to-video matching rate across the entire set remained low, but again, the category matching rate was reasonably high, actually a bit better than the first dataset, over 50%.
So consistently getting the broad categories more often than the exact video placement.
Correct. And just like before, when they isolated the subset of videos where Gemini's predictions were most aligned with humans to begin with.
The matching improved significantly again.
Exactly. Both the one-to-one video matching and the category matching rates went up considerably for those best understood videos.
It seems like a consistent finding across both data sets. Now, they didn't just test Gemini on this second set, right? You mentioned other models.
Correct. For the second larger data set, they also included results for GPT 4.1 and an open source model called MLLM-7BD.
Okay. How did they stack up?
Well, GPT 4.1's performance was generally pretty similar to Gemini's, maybe slightly below it on some measures, but in the same ballpark, still showing that moderate ability to capture structure.
And Molmo, the open source one.
Momo, while it still performed significantly better than just random chance, showed generally lower accuracy and lower structural alignment than both Gemini and GPT 4.1 across most of the measures they looked at.
That's really interesting. Why is that significant?
Well, it highlights something important. Momo is actually known to be quite good on certain standard AI benchmark tests for things like visual recognition.
Okay.
But it still showed limitations here on this more complex, nuanced task of inferring the underlying structure of human emotional responses to videos. It suggests that just being good at step 1, recognizing objects and actions, doesn't automatically make an AI good at step 2, reasoning about the latent context-dependent emotional impact.
Ah, right. That two-step process again. Good visual recognition is necessary, but not sufficient for understanding the emotion.
Exactly. The researchers really emphasize that the huge progress we've seen in MLLMs just in the last few years has been crucial. Models from, say, 2023 like Belii P2 or Lava just weren't as capable at step 1, the visual understanding part, compared to the 2024-2025 models like GPT 4.1 and Gemini.
So, getting better at simply seeing what's in the video was a prerequisite for making progress on understanding the feelings associated with it.
Absolutely. That improvement in basic visual understanding paved the way for these newer models to even start tackling the much harder step 2, the emotion inference part.
But as we've seen, even these state-of-the-art models still hit roadblocks.
Yes. They still face hurdles, particularly with videos that demand that deeper grasp of context, social cues, narrative developments, and maybe even potentially relating to internal bodily feelings, interoceptive signals that visual information alone just can't fully capture.
Things that we feel physically when we watch something intense, perhaps.
Could be. That's an area for future research, maybe incorporating social context more explicitly, or even trying to model those interoceptive signals somehow, and perhaps fine-tuning models specifically on these kinds of emotion-scene associations.
So bringing it all together then, if you had to summarize the key takeaways from this deep dive into AI, video, and emotion, what would they be?
I think the central takeaway is that the current state-of-the-art MLLMs like Gemini and GPT are demonstrating a pretty notable capability. They can grasp the broad categories of human emotions elicited by video, and they can do it at a structural level.
Okay, so even if they don't nail the feeling for every single video perfectly.
Right. Even if the individual predictions aren't always spot on compared to humans, they are developing a sense of how different emotional experiences relate to each other. They're learning the overall map, the structure of feelings prompted by watching things.
So the real aha moment here is maybe less about perfect individual prediction and more about the model starting to understand the relationships between different emotional experiences in response to video.
Right.
They're recognizing the patterns in our emotional reactions.
Precisely. They're capturing aspects of that relational structure.
And for you, the listener, maybe this helps take away some of the feeling of being overwhelmed. Human emotion is incredibly complex, yes, but
But the fact that MLLMs are making these kinds of strides in actually understanding its underlying structure, even just partially, provides a really fascinating new lens. It's a new tool for studying our own effective lives.
which leads us to a final thought for you to mull over. Given that these MLMs can capture the structure of emotion, at least at a category level, what are the implications? How might this influence the way we design AI to interact with us, to understand our emotional states in, say, healthcare or entertainment or education?
Yeah, and what might this tell us about the fundamental nature of emotional experience itself? How it might be encoded or represented if even an AI without a body can start to replicate parts of its structure just from visual input?
It really makes you think about what understanding emotion truly means, doesn't it?
It does. We encourage you to maybe think back on those examples, the videos where AI did well, the ones where it struggled. Where else do you foresee AI excelling or continuing to face challenges in figuring out how we feel?
And of course, if you want to go even deeper, the research paper itself has a lot more detail.
Absolutely.
Thanks for taking the deep dive with us today. Until our next exploration, keep those questions coming.